Hello and welcome to this course on 7 Office 365 security settings you can configure with PowerShell. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Vlad Catrinescu. I'm a Microsoft MVP and Microsoft certified trainer from Montreal, Canada. I'm also an author of 2 books. One of them is called Deploying SharePoint 2016 and the other one is called Essential PowerShell for Office 365, and I also create stuff for Pluralsight. For those of you who don't know Pluralsight, it's an online on-demand training site. They have a bunch of different courses on SharePoint, Office 365, PowerShell, Azure, and so on. For those of you on Twitter, you can find me at Vlad Catrinescu, and I also blog at absolute-sharepoint.com. Before getting deeper into the topic, whenever I talk about PowerShell for Office 365, a lot of people ask me, Vlad, do we really need to learn PowerShell? I mean, I can administer already Office 365 with the Office 365 Admin Center and the Office 365 Admin app. Why do I need to learn PowerShell? And that is a great question because, I mean, if we look at the way that Microsoft built tools, especially a long time ago, it moved kind of from the console to the user interface. And especially now in Office 365 that we don't have access to the servers. We don't use servers anymore. We manage a service. Why would an admin want to learn PowerShell? Despite the fact that the Office 365 Admin Center is really a cool tool. It has a lot of options. It allows you to manage all of the services inside. Not all the settings are available there. Most of the settings that we cover in this course are actually not available in the Office 365 Admin Center. So even if you have access to it, you don't have access to everything. And also, the Office 365 Admin Center doesn't allow you to do tasks across services easily, doesn't allow you to access multiple records easily. It's really built for doing basic tasks and all of that. With PowerShell, you really have access to all of the settings, all of the services, and by creating different scripts, it also allows you to automate tasks. A good example can be security report. If you want to create security reports, if you want to do tenant health checks, if you want to do things like that, doing them with the Admin Center, can it be done? Yes, but it's really not productive or user-friendly. And this is where PowerShell comes in to give you access to all of the settings and to allow you to automate tasks, reports, and things like that. To get the most out of this course, some of the prerequisites would be to have a basic knowledge of PowerShell. As the title suggests, of course, we're going to mostly talk about PowerShell in this course. I will explain stuff in detail. But if you have a basic knowledge of PowerShell, what it is, how the syntax works, and so on, it will really help you get up to speed with the stuff we cover a lot faster. A working knowledge of Office 365 is also recommended. When I talk about certain services, certain concepts, it will help a lot if you know, for example, what a site collection in SharePoint is, what is mailbox in Exchange, what is how users are managed in Azure AD. So you don't need to be an expert in all of them, but if you have a working knowledge, that is fine. Now let's talk a bit about what we'll cover in this course. So in this course, the first thing that we'll cover is creating a secret Office 365 group. A lot more companies are using Office 365 groups, and whenever I present at conferences, a lot of them are really surprised when I show them the default behavior of a private Office 365 group. So in this first module, we will look at what the default behavior is and how to create a secret one, which is not really a technical term, but you will see what I mean when we get in that module. We'll then learn how to set an idle session timeout in SharePoint and OneDrive. A lot more people use shared devices to access work resources, and you don't want them to leave a session open on the computer by default. So Microsoft allows us to automatically disconnect the user after they haven't been active for a certain period of time, and in this module, that's exactly what we'll learn. We'll then talk about anonymous links for SharePoint files So if somebody shares a link anonymously, we're going to look at how to put a default expiration so that link doesn't stay an open door to your company forever. We'll also look at how to restrict files that can be synced with OneDrive for Business. If you have some restricted file types like X-rays, video files, things like that that might be restricted in nature, we'll learn how to restrict what extensions, what type of files can be synced locally with OneDrive for Business. We'll then learn how to set guest policies for Office 365 groups, as well as how to configure notifications and permissions for external users in SharePoint Online and Office 365. And the last one, we'll talk about Skype for Business. We'll learn how to block guests from recording Skype for Business meetings. So that is what we'll cover on this course. I hope you guys are excited to learn it. And in each module, we'll cover both the theory behind what is the business need. I mean, we don't want to implement a technical change without a business need behind. So we will cover that as well. And of course, look at the technical side, how to implement it and how to make sure that it works. So thank you very much for listening to this module. Let's go directly into the second one and learn how to create a secret Office 365 group. So why do we talk about a secret group? I mean, Office 365 already includes a type of group called private. However, out of the box, private Office 365 groups still reveal a lot of information to everybody. For every Office 365 group, even if type private, that was created using the user interface, everybody else in the company can see the title, the members inside, and even invite other people to that Office 365 group. Sometimes in an open workspace, this can be okay. Let's say you want to share all of the projects that the company did. Even if they're private by nature, so nobody can see the actual documents inside, them knowing that this project has been done and maybe seeing who the PM, who the members were, is completely fine and even makes everybody more productive, or an interest group, for example. However, imagine if it's a reorg. Do you really want everybody in the company to go in Office 365 Monday morning, go into Outlook, go into Discover groups and see reorg 2019? That's not a good feeling to have, that everybody finds out about a reorg because they just stumbled on it inside of Office 365 before it was officially announced. I know this might not be fully clear, especially if you have not seen the behavior of the out-of-the-box private groups already. So let's go to the demo site and see what does a private group show everybody in Office 365. I am now in my demo virtual machine, so let me go here in Internet Explorer where I'm logged in as Vlad Catrinescu, and I will go as a normal user and create an Office 365 group. So let me close this, let me go to groups here, click on create, and let's call it a super important private group. Again, I'm really awful at creating stuff on the fly, so I'm really sorry in advance if you don't like my example, but let's call this one super important private groups. The privacy will put it to private, and let's click on create. Then I will add Jeff Collins to this group as a member, click on add, and then the group will be created in the next few seconds. After the group is created, now let me go and log into Office 365 as another user. I'll just refresh this page and let's see who I am logged in with. I'm logged in as Vanessa Lee, who is not a member of that group because that group is only made of Vlad and Jeff. So let's say we are Monday morning. I will go to my Outlook and I will see what happened in my company. I'll just go to groups and I will click on discover. As you see, even if that group was of type private and I'm not a member of that group, I can still see super important private group as available and even suggested to me. Again, in this case, this might not be super bad, but imagine if it was a reorg and everybody was able to see that, hey, there is a reorg coming up and the group just got created. Now let's see what happens when I click on the group. So I'll click on super important private group. You still see that the group is private and you cannot see the messages or the documents, which is a good thing. However, I still have access to something really important, which is the member list. So I can click here on 2 members at the top, and you can see that even if I'm not a member of this private group, I can still see that Jeff Collins and Vlad Catrinescu are members. Imagine again this was a reorg, and as a manager, I can see all of the members of that reorg. I can be like, hey, all of the other managers are part of this group, but I'm excluded. That automatically means that I'm going to be fired. So again, you don't want to leak this type of information, even if it's not the message or the document. Leaking the titles and the members can be a pretty important security leak as well. Something else that is weird but really important that I can do is I'm getting fired, I'll go out with a bang. So I can go here and I can invite other people to this group. Yes, they will not get added directly, they will simply get an invite. However, I can still invite people to a group that I'm not a member of that should be private. And I can email this to all the company, so all of the company will know that there is a reorg coming up. So again, this might be useful in some cases. Like say we have project groups, we have interest groups. Being able to see the members and the title can be beneficial. It's not always bad. However, if you want to have a secret group, there is no way you can do it by the user interface. The only way you can create a secret group is by PowerShell. And something that I want to tell you right away, a secret group is not an official term. It's not a technical term at all. It's just a term that I invented to talk about a group that nobody can see its members and nobody can find that it exists unless they're a member of that group. So now that we've seen the default behavior of a private group in Office 365, let's go back to the slides and learn how to create a secret Office 365 group with PowerShell. Let's first look at the theory on how to create a secret Office 365 group with PowerShell. First of all, it's really a multi-step process because we need to hide 2 different things. First of all, we need to hide the group from search or from the Discover tab, and then we need to hide the group membership in case somebody, even if it's not from the search, somebody gets a direct link to that group by mistake. When they click on it, they should not see the group membership. That is the second thing that we need to add. Something that is really important and unfortunate in my opinion is that hiding the group membership can only be done at group creation. So it's really important that you kind of implement a process to creating secret group as soon as possible, because that part of the process can only be done at group creation and not after the group has been created. The second part, hiding group from search, can be done anytime after the group is created. So we're even gonna cover in the demo how to hide all of the existing private groups from search. So because of that, creating a secret group can only be done via PowerShell. So let's take a look at the PowerShell commandlets to do it. First of all, to manage Office 365 groups, or at least in this module, we'll be using the Exchange Online PowerShell commandlets. So we will connect to Exchange Online and use the new unified group PowerShell commandlet. We're going to give it a display name, an alias, the access type private, and finally specify the hidden group membership enabled. So what this will do, this is what will actually set it to hide the group membership. And this is the first step. The second step, which we cannot actually do in a single commandlet, unfortunately, so we actually have to do it as 2 separate commandlets, is set the unified group, the group that we have just created, hidden from address list enabled true. Because the way that the Discovery tab and the search works in Outlook Web App is it uses all of the groups that are shown in the address list. So if you hide it from the address list, it will not be displayed inside the group search in Office 365. That is it for the theory. As you see, it's not that complicated once you know how to do it. But let's go to the lab now and let's see how to create a secret Office 365 group with PowerShell. We are now back in the lab environment, so let's first of all go to PowerShell. The first thing I will do is I will connect to Exchange Online. In this course, I will not cover how to connect to the different Office 365 services because I want to keep it short and I want to keep it on point with real case scenarios. There is a bunch of great resources out there on how to do the basic connections, so I will not spend an hour in this course only covering that part. I will share different resources throughout the course on where you can actually find this information if needed, but will not go in detail in the videos. So I'll first of all get my credential. Let me run this part. vladadmin@varonisvideos.onmicrosoft.com. Enter my password. Then I will run the new PS session commandlet to create a new remote session on the Exchange Online service that I'm connecting to. And finally, I will import this session to finalize the connection and to get the Exchange Online PowerShell module in my current PowerShell session. Scrolling down a bit, now we will look at the PowerShell code we have covered in the slides. Because now I'm logged in as vladadmin, by default when I create the unified group, I will be the only member inside. So let me actually run this first commandlet. We'll create a new unified group, so a new Office 365 group, display name, alias, access type private, and we have specified the hidden group membership enabled. Remember that for now it's still visible inside the search because the only thing we did is we've hidden the group membership. So let me actually go directly in the example and show you what that means. So I will log in as Vanessa Lee, which remember is not a member of that group, and I will go to the Discover tab. Because I haven't hid it from search yet, as you see I can still see my previous example, super important private group, and the new one I just created called Reorg 2019. Just to show you the difference between the two, I will first go in the super important private group, and I would like to draw your attention to the top right where you see this is a private group, the request to join button, the list of members, and the settings wheel where you can invite other people. So really look at this in this group that we have created using the UI. And now let's go to the group that we have created with PowerShell with the hidden group membership enabled. As you see, what this first step did is that it actually hid all of that top panel for members that are not part of the group. So even if somebody finds it or they get a link to it by accident, they will know there's a reorg coming in 2019, but they will not know that they're the only manager that's gonna get fired. So we still haven't created a fully secret group yet, but we're one step ahead. Now the next step I will do is I will set unified groups. I'll modify the Office 365 group, the identity, the reorg 2019, so give it the alias of the group we just created, and then specify the hidden from address list enabled equal true. So now let's take a look at the result. I will actually close this tab just to refresh the cache, because sometimes if you don't close the tab, you don't see the result right away. So now if I go in Discover, I should not see the group. Like I said, sometimes because of the cache, you actually can see it for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Let me try it again. As you've seen before in the search, it didn't appear, but it should not appear in the proposed groups either. If I go on Discover now, I do not see it as a proposed group. And if I search 2019 or reorg, it's not shown. So remember, when you do your testing, as you've seen live in my demo, there can be a little cache issue for like 5 to 10 minutes. If you close the tab, 99% of the time it will update right away. But I'm actually glad that it didn't, so you guys can see the behavior with the cache. Great, so now we've managed to create a secret Office 365 group that people cannot find in search, and that even if they get to it by somebody accidentally sending a link, they will not be able to see the members. As we have talked before, the hidden group membership enabled property can only be set at group creation and cannot be set after. So this one we cannot modify. However, the hidden from address list enabled is true can be actually modified after, and I want to share a quick PowerShell commandlet to show you guys how to use PowerShell to change all of them in a single command. So what I'll do is I will get unified group where access type equals private. So let me run this first part first just to show you what it will do. This first part will show me all of the different Office 365 groups that are in private mode. After I get all of them, I will pipe the information and do a set unified group hidden from address list enabled is true. So that will set all of the existing private groups to be hidden from search. So I will click on run the selection. You might see that I will get some warnings here. This warning basically says the command completed successfully, but no settings of those groups have been changed because those groups were already set to be hidden from the address list. So now if I do another test, I will close. Let me maybe just for my luck refresh this page as well. Go to Outlook, go to Discover Groups, and hopefully, and as you see, I don't even see that super important private group anymore. I can even search for super or things like that. It will not return it to me, even if I go to all groups, active groups, and so on. So that is it for this module. In this module, we have learned how to create a secret Office 365 group, which can only be done via PowerShell, and we have learned how to use the hidden group membership enabled switch parameter on group creation, how to change the group to be hidden from the address list, which hides it from the discovery and search tab in Office 365, and finally a quick commandlet on how to change all of your existing Office 365 groups that are of type private to be hidden from search. That is it for this module. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you found it informative. In this module, we'll learn how to set an idle session timeout in SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. First of all, what is idle session timeout and why do we need it? As you probably know by now, work is not only done from the office anymore. Users work from their personal computer at home, in a coffee shop, or even from shared computers across the globe. Idle session timeout automatically warns and then signs out to users from SharePoint and OneDrive after a set period of inactivity. This way, if a user is in a coffee shop, if a user is on a public computer, if they ever leave their Office 365 logged in and they just walk away forgetting to lock it, which, I mean, even today, I still see it a lot in airports, in lounges, in coffee shops that people are on their work email or even on SharePoint sites, and they just walk away to the washroom or to buy another coffee and leave everything open and logged in. With this functionality, you can automatically log them out after a set period of time, which will decrease the risk of somebody gaining access to your systems. So let's learn how do we set the idle session timeout. As you probably see with the course name, this can only be done via PowerShell. The commandlet to do it is set SPO browser idle signout. By default, it is disabled, so the first thing we have to do is set it to enabled, and then we have to say after how long does the user get a warning, and after that, after how long does the user get signed out. So for the warning, we give the warn after parameter, new time span, and the amount of minutes. In this case, I have 5. And then the sign out after, in this case, I have 10 minutes. It's important to know from a technical point of view, the sign out after needs to be more time than the warn after, and they cannot be equal. So if you have warn after 5 minutes, you would need at least 6 minutes for the sign out in order for the commandlet to work properly. Something else that is important is that the policy will not work if the user has selected the keep me signed in or has said yes to the stay signed in whenever they're logging in. So the policy will actually look at what the user has selected, and if they said yes, this policy will not work. Microsoft is working a lot on improving the security in Office 365, and a lot of the things they have done is that if you log in from another country, from another IP address than you usually log in from, a lot of the times the stay signed in window will not even appear, will not even be a choice. So they're really working on detecting when you're working from a public location to not give you that option. However, it might still happen that even if you're on a public computer, that option is there, and if the user selects yes, well, this policy will not take effect. So it's really important to know this when you're testing it, and from a technical point of view, that if the stay signed in is selected, this policy will not apply. So now let's go to the demo and let's see how do we set the idle session timeout in SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. We are now in the demo environment, so let me open up PowerShell over here. The first thing I will do is I will connect to SharePoint Online. So I will get my credential. As you see, I've already put a message and the username, so I don't have to retype the username, only have to retype the password. And then I will connect to SharePoint Online using the connect SPO service PowerShell commandlet and giving the URL of my SharePoint Online admin center, which is Varonis videos-admin.sharepoint.com. It's the same exact URL as my, again, SharePoint Online admin center that I have over here. So I will connect, let me run this, should only take a few seconds, and then I will run the PowerShell commandlet to set SPO browser idle signout, enabled yes, warn after. I wanted to make it a bit shorter for this demo so we don't wait for a really long time before seeing the results. So I put warn after 2 minutes and then sign out after 5 minutes. Actually, let me put it to 3 so we have it even faster. So let me run this commandlet as well. And then what I will do is I will connect to Office 365. Let me open up Chrome here. Go to portal.office.com. Let's log in with Vanessa at varonisvideos.microsoft.com or on Microsoft.com. Let me put in the right password. That usually works a lot better. And then I will just go to one of the SharePoint sites over here. Let's not go to the SharePoint home. Let's just go to the basic SharePoint site. So now, while this goes back in the background, so it's inactive, if you want to see the current settings, maybe you've actually enabled this in the past, but you're not sure. To give you an idea, this settings got created in November 2017, so it's still fairly new at the time of recording this video. But if you want to see what the current settings are, you can do a get SPO browser idle signout PowerShell commandlet, and you can see that in this case it's enabled yes, warn after 2 minutes, and sign out after 3 minutes. So that is it really for the PowerShell commandlet. Let me actually try to do it in IE as well, so we have another test over here to see it happening. Let's see who I'm actually logged in here. I'm logged in with Vlad. Let me start maybe in private browser and log in with another user so we can see it work on both browsers. So I'll log in with John at varonisvideos.onmicrosoft.com, give it the password, and see here is the famous stay signed in dialog that I was talking to you about. And since I want this policy to take effect, I will put it to no, do not stay signed in. And now let me close this. Let's go to SharePoint. And let's go to a SharePoint site as if we're collaborating like a user. So now I'll just put this on the left. I'll put the Chrome dialog that I had over there on the right. You actually see that it took 2 minutes and we already have the warning on that first one to the right. You're about to be signed out of Office 365. For security reasons, your connection times out after you've been inactive for a while, and then click continue to stay signed in. So I'm just going to stop talking for now, and I will fast forward the video so you can see what happens if nothing is happening. And there you go. As you see, the browser on IE on the left signed me out as well. And after the period of inactivity, it says you're signed out of Office 365. Your organization's IT policy signs you out after a period of inactivity. So even if I try to go here, just switch the tabs, it signed me out completely. So even if it says signs you out of SharePoint and OneDrive, it actually fully signs you off Office 365. So that is it for this module. In this module, we have learned how to use the set SPO browser idle signout PowerShell commandlet to set an idle session timeout in SharePoint and OneDrive. This way, if your users forget their computer is open in a public space or on a public computer, they'll automatically be signed out so that you're sure another user will not log in on the same computer and access your documents. That is it for this module. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you found it informative. In this module, we'll cover how to configure an expiration on anonymous links. First of all, what are anonymous links? Anonymous links allow users to share documents with external users without requiring a login. This way, administrators don't have to waste time creating a username and password, troubleshooting login information, and things like that. So it can really be a huge time saver when a business user just wants to share a document with another partner or external user without having to go through IT. As an admin, you don't want to block users from using this functionality because it would stop them from being productive. And even from an Office 365 security standpoint, Microsoft recommends that you turn it on. The screenshot at the right part of this slide is a screenshot from the Office 365 Secure Store. If you turn off anonymous sharing, Microsoft actually says that you should turn this on because if you disallow it, what users will do is they will in fact go to Dropbox, to Google Drive, and they will use this functionality in a system that you have no idea about and you do not control. So it's better that you actually allow them to do it in SharePoint in a controlled way rather than block them completely and they go and use another system that you have no idea about. With the anonymous links expiration date, you can actually set up a limitation on how long anonymous links are valid for. Because by default, users can create anonymous links that are valid forever. So the link that they create to a document can be shared on Twitter, can be shared in another email, and it will be valid forever. By setting a default expiration date, you know at least that after a set amount of days, that link will stop working, so you don't have an indefinite open window to that document. So how do we do it? Configuring the anonymous expiration can be done via PowerShell with the set SPO tenant PowerShell commandlet, and the parameter name is require anonymous links expire in days, and then the number of days. In this case, I set it to 7. So that is it. As you see, it's really simple and is really a setting that I think every tenant admin should configure on their environment. So now let's go to the demo environment and see how this looks like in the real life. We are now in the demo environment, so let me go actually to a SharePoint site here, brand new tenant, and let's take a look at the default behavior. I have uploaded this PowerPoint file in here, so I will go on share and then get a link. And as you see, when I actually create it by default, it actually doesn't expire. And I can set this link to expire never, in 1 day, 30 days, 60 days, or custom. But I still have the option to set this link to never expire, which is what we want to block in this module. So let me close this. Let me open up PowerShell ISC. The first thing I will do is I will get my credential so I can log into Office 365. I will connect to the SharePoint Online Admin Center using PowerShell. So connect SPO service, give it the URL of the SharePoint Online Admin Center and the credential that we just got, and then the commandlet that we looked at in the slides, which is set SPO tenant, require anonymous links expire in days, and set it to 7. This, of course, you can change it to the amount of days that makes sense for your business. Now, this setting usually takes effect pretty fast. Let's try to see if it already took effect. If not, I will log in with another user to kind of force that refresh. So I'll do the same thing, go select my document, click on share, get a link, set expiration, let's put 8 days, click on save, and you see now I get this error. Your organization's policy doesn't allow links to stay active for more than 7 days. So now by default, it will be active for a maximum of 7 days, and users cannot even make it active more than that. Some other settings that you might be interested that have to do with anonymous links. Let me actually do a get SPO tenant so we can look at some of the available settings that might be interesting on the same subject. One of them is, what is the default link type that gets created when people share an anonymous link? As you see, by default, both the file anonymous link type is edit and the folder anonymous link type is edit. While you might want to allow your users to share anonymous links, maybe you just want them to allow to share those in view mode and not in edit mode. This way you tell them if you need to show a document to an external user, you can do it via anonymous links, but if you want them to be able to edit it, they need to log in. So you could do a set SPO tenant, file anonymous link type, view, click on OK. And now by default, whenever a user tries to share a file, so let me refresh this, let me go back on the slides, click on share, get a link. You see now by default is view link, no sign-in required. However, the edit link, it says you need to have an account inside of the company in order to be able to do it. So this is another way in which administrators can actually enable anonymous links and allow users to be productive, while also be able to restrict what users can do with them and make sure that the company files are secure. So that is it for this module. In this module, we have reviewed how to use the setSPO tenant with the require anonymous links expire in days and a number of days to learn how to actually enable a default or a maximum expiration number of days for anonymous links. Thank you for listening to this module, and I hope you found it informative. In this module, we'll learn how to restrict file types that can be synced with the OneDrive for Business client. First of all, what is OneDrive for Business? OneDrive for Business is the personal space of each user where they can store personal files. Users can access OneDrive for Business via the online user interface with their browser or with the OneDrive for Business client. The OneDrive for Business client allows users to drag and drop files from their desktop to a folder, and they get automatically uploaded to Office 365. While the functionality is really cool for users where they can drag and drop a large number of files and they get automatically uploaded and synced across all of their devices, you might want to block certain file types from being uploaded at once with the sync client. Think at file extensions such as executables. If the client computer got hacked and the files all got turned to encrypted, or the CryptoLocker extension, or MSI VPS scripts, things like that, you might not want to allow users to drag and drop or even to change certain files with certain extensions and they get automatically propagated on all of their devices. So with Office 365, you can block certain file types from being synced with the OneDrive for Business client. So let's take a look at the PowerShell script to do it. To set the excluded file types, we need to use the set SPO tenant sync client restriction PowerShell commandlet, and then give it the parameter excluded file extensions. And in this example, I'm giving it PowerPoint files, Word documents, and Excel files. You probably don't want to exclude those file types in your company, but I just wanted to give you an example that's easy to test. So as you can see, the PowerShell script for this specific task is really simple, but the set SPO tenant sync client restriction can also configure other cool security features. For example, you could restrict non-domain joined machines from syncing stuff with OneDrive for Business. This way, people cannot use the client on their home computer or on a public computer, only on their work laptop or work computer, which is domain joined. You can also block users from using the old OneDrive for Business sync client, also commonly called Groove, as well as block the Mac sync. So if you have a lot of group policies which cannot apply to Macs, you can block Mac clients from using the OneDrive for Business sync client while still allowing them to use OneDrive for Business via the browser. Something really important to remember, it can take up to 24 hours for the changes to take effect. And whereas usually the SLA is 24 hours, but it works after 30 minutes, from my experience, this one has really been 24 hours before they take effect. So make sure that after you run the PowerShell commandlet, you really give it some time to take effect, preferably a day before you test it, so you can make sure that it's not waiting again, even if your PowerShell commandlets were fine. So now let's take a look at the demo environment. Let's go and restrict the file types that can be synced with the OneDrive for Business client. I am now in my demo environment, so let's open up the PowerShell ISE. The first thing that I will do is I will get my credential. As you see, I've already added the username as part of the get credential message, just to make it easier for the video, especially that this is a really long username. And then I will connect to the SharePoint Online service using the tenant admin, the SharePoint Online admin URL, and giving it the credential that I just got. It should only take a few seconds. And now I will run the set SPO tenant sync client restriction PowerShell commandlet, and I will block PowerPoint files and MP3 files in this example. Now I will have to let it run. I'll have to stop the video and come back the next day for me, but only in a few seconds for you. But before I stop the video, as you can see with the set SPO tenant sync client restriction, you can add, for example, an allowed domain list. So only computers logged on with those domains can use the OneDrive for Business sync client. You could block the Mac sync. You could opt out of a Groove, which is the old client. So there are multiple other cool security things that you can do with this PowerShell commandlet. Now let me stop this video while the commandlet applies, and I'll be back in a day to finish the second part of this video, which will be the results of our commandlet. Back in the virtual machine 1 day later, I have connected the OneDrive for Business of John Smith on this computer, and as you see, it's empty over here and empty in the browser as well. Now let me go here. I have some sample files. Remember that in our PowerShell script, we have blocked PowerPoint files and MP3 files. So what do I have? I have an MP3 file, a PowerPoint file, an MSI file, and a CSV file, just so we can test multiple files. So let me copy this and let me paste it inside the OneDrive for Business folder. As you see, and even if I refresh over here, it should already be visible. The CSV file has been synced. The MSI file or the executable has been synced, as we see here, but the PowerPoint and the MP3 file have been blocked. And if we look at the information, we see that two items cannot be synced. The name or type of this file is not allowed. For information about your organization policies, contact your IT department. So our configuration has been a success. we were able to configure certain file types to not be synchronized with the OneDrive for Business sync client. In this module, we'll learn how to set guest policies for Office 365 groups. First of all, what are Office 365 groups and why do people use them? Office 365 groups bring together multiple Office 365 services that make it easy for users to consume all of them without focusing on a single service. So Office 365 groups are a great all-in-one solution, whether you need a project, whether you need to collaborate with external users, or you just need a committee site. As an Office 365 administrator, you need to be able to control what groups are shared with external and with whom those groups are shared with. So let's take a look at some of the settings that we can have on external sharing for Office 365 groups. Most of the Office 365 guest policy settings for 365 groups are configured in Azure Active Directory using an Azure AD directory setting. There are settings that you can do at the tenant level, such as do you want to allow guests to access groups or not at the tenant level? Do you want to allow guests to be group owners or not? Or do you want to let all of the existing groups that already have guests to keep having access to them, but block any new guests from being added? This is really useful if you're just starting to add a governance policy to your groups and you realize that some departments are already using it, but you just want to block it while you have that proper governance in place without blocking the productivity of the current users. So this can really be an interesting one in some cases. At the group level setting, you can really configure if you want to allow new guests to be added or not. And like I said before, all of this configuration is done via an Azure AD directory setting. So let's start to look at the PowerShell, first of all looking at the tenant level directory settings. The first thing we need to do is to check if a setting already exists. Because we're only supposed to have one Azure AD directory setting for groups per tenant, so what we'll do is we'll do a get Azure AD directory setting where the display name is group.unified and then take a look at the values. If you see the values returned, that means there's already an existing group there. If not, that means you need to create a new one. To create a new Azure AD directory setting object, you first of all need to start from the template called Group Unified. So you do a get Azure AD directory setting template where the display name is group.unified. Then you run the create directory setting method on that template, and then you simply create a new Azure AD directory setting starting from that template. Once we have it, it will come with the default values in Office 365, and we need to configure the settings. In this module, we will not really focus, or in this course even, on all of the possible settings for groups governance. We'll only focus on the ones related to guests and external access. So first thing I will do is I will get my Azure AD directory setting and save it inside a variable called settings. Then, if you completely want to turn off external access, you would put allow guests to access groups to false. If you still want to allow them, you would put it to true. If you want to disallow new guests, so all of the existing ones still be able, but not any new ones, you would change the allowed to add guests property to false to stop it, to true to leave it open. And finally, we have the allow guests to be a group owner, false to block it, and true to allow it. At the group level setting, we actually need to have a directory setting object per group. So what I will do is I will get the Azure AD directory setting template and save it in a variable called template, run the create directory setting again, and run the create directory setting method. I will then, let's say for this group, I don't want to allow any new guests to access it or to be invited. So I'll do settings, allowed to add guests equal false, I will then get that Office 365 group by searching with the email address and saving it in a variable called group. And lastly, I'll run the new Azure AD object setting, target type groups, target object ID, the object ID of the Office 365 group that I got, and the directory setting, give it the settings directory setting that I have just created before. So as you see, it's quite easy. Once you have the script in place, you can create lots of cool automation ideas and ways to automate it to make sense for your business. Something to remember is that, again, for Office 365 groups as well, it can take up to 24 hours for the changes to take effect. For guest settings, usually I've seen it take effect in any time from 30 minutes to 4 hours. It didn't take 24 hours yet. However, don't open a support ticket with Microsoft or don't freak out until you've let 24 hours pass by after configuring it, because that's the SLA that Microsoft recommends to wait until the changes make effect. So now let's go to the demo and see it in real life how we can set guest policies for Office 365 groups with PowerShell. We are now in the lab environment, so let's learn how to set guest policies for Office 365 groups. First of all, let me open up the PowerShell ISC. I will get my credentials here, let me enter my password, and then I will connect to Azure Active Directory so we can apply the changes. First thing first, as we have learned, we will check if there's already a tenant level setting, because you can only have one per tenant, so I will try to get the Azure AD directory setting with the display name group unified, and if there is none, what happens when I do setting.values, it returns nothing, as in this example here. So that means if I want to do any tenant level settings, I have to create a new one. So what I'll do is I'll get the Azure AD directory setting template, saving in a variable called setting template, then call the create directory setting PowerShell method of that object, and lastly create it. Oops, if I select all of the line it goes a lot better, and there we go. So now the setting is created. To see that it's created, I can run the exact same PowerShell commandlet as I did before, and you'll see that this time it will actually show the values, and it has been created with the default values. The ones that we will play with today are the allow guests to be a group owner, allow guests to access groups, and allow to add guests. But as you see, there's multiple other settings over there that allow you to configure and govern Office 365 groups better. We'll not talk about all of them in this module. We'll only focus on the guest ones. So now what I will do is I will change all of the 3 settings we talked about to false. And lastly, I will update my Azure AD directory setting. And this is, the least permissions you can give. Existing group guest will not be able to log in anymore, and nobody will be able to add any new ones. And honestly, this is something that you might want to think twice before enabling. It's something you can do. The allow guests to access groups. If you've just been hacked and you have no idea what's happening, where it's coming from, you might want to temporarily stop all of the existing guests to accessing it while you find out where that hack or that document leak is coming from. However, it's recommended that instead of blocking it completely, you do it either per group or you add some logic into it to still allow users to be productive while being in a controlled environment. Because if you stop everything and you block everything in your own tenant, they might use other tools such as Google Drive, Dropbox to share stuff externally. And if you don't have access to those, you don't even know they're there, well, you lose complete control. So let's turn it back off. Let's go exactly the opposite way and allow guests to access groups, allow other people to add guests, and allow guests to be a group owner. So probably the right answer is somewhere in the middle, but it depends for each company. So now that you know how to modify them, at the tenant level, I will let you adapt the setting to your specific needs. Next up, let's learn how to change a setting for only a specific group. So what I'll do with the template, I'll get the Azure AD directory setting template where the display name is Group Unified Guest. So I have run the get Azure AD directory setting template. Now let me create the directory setting and I will change it to not allow it to add guests. Next up, I need to get the group on which I want to apply it. So I will use that super important group that we have created a few modules ago. So I'll get Azure AD group where the title or some property has super important inside. I know that in this case I only have one, so I know I got the right one. And lastly, I will run the new Azure AD object setting PowerShell commandlet, target type groups, the object ID, the group object ID, and then the directory setting, the settings that we have just created. Let me run this, and that is it. What we'll do now, since this always takes a few hours to actually apply, I will pause the video for a few hours. It will only take a few seconds for you guys, and then we'll be back and look at the results. We are now back in the lab a few hours later, so let's see if the policy took effect. So I will go on Google Chrome over here, go into Outlook to view my groups, go on the super important private group, and click on members, and let's try to add an external guest. Click on add members, and let's try to add cmvlad@hotmail.com. And as you see right away, it doesn't let us do it at all. It has this error message: before you can add guests as member of the group, you need to contact your administrator. So the policy has been applied and it's a success. In this module, we have learned how to apply guest policies at both the tenant level as well as at the group level, so you can manage guest settings for specific groups. Thank you very much for listening to this module, and I hope you found it informative. In this module, we will talk about configuring notifications and permissions for external users in SharePoint Online. First of all, what is external access in SharePoint Online and why is it important? SharePoint Online empowers business users to easily collaborate with external users. As an Office 365 administrator, you need to allow them to be productive, but also make sure that it's done securely. Office 365 gives you multiple settings to control how external sharing is done, so you can control who users can share with, make sure that you know when they're sharing, but not actually blocking them and stopping them from being productive. So let's take a look at some of the features on how we can allow users to securely collaborate with external users in Office 365. First of all, what can we configure? Security settings can be configured at the tenant level or site collection level. At the tenant level, we can really configure quite a few features, such as the invited user must log in with the same email they were invited with. By default in Office 365, let's say you invite Vlad Catrunescu with an email address, vlad@company.com. Vlad could actually accept that invite but log in with vlad@hotmail.com. So even after Vlad quits company.com, because the connection to your site is done with Vlad's Hotmail address, they would still be able to log in even if after they quit the company. So using PowerShell, you could actually force users to accept the invitation with the email you invite them with. So this way they would have to log in with vlad@company.com. You can also BCC distribution list for certain users on all of the external invites. So IT can know who gets invited when right away. So if they see any red flags, they can be proactive and act on it right away. You can also notify owners when invitations are accepted, and you can set an allow or block list at the domain level for the whole tenant. So you can say, okay, we're going to start a new project with Varonis.com. So we're going to add Varonis to our allow list. And until that domain is on the allow list, nobody can invite users in that domain. So this way you're allowed to actually control what companies can your external users share content with. At the site collection level, you can actually have a domain allow or block list at the site collection level as well if you don't want to put it at the tenant level. Something you could do at the site collection level is prevent external users from resharing content. By default, when you add an external users to the contributors group of your site, the permission there by default is edit. So the external user that you have added can actually invite other external users and so on. So you might not want that. What you can do is you can configure that only owners of the site are able to reshare the content. So external users would have to go to the owner to add other people, so you can actually stay in control of your external shared sites. Some of those items can be done both via user interface or via PowerShell. However, multiple of the settings above can only be done via PowerShell. So that's why I think it's really important that we cover it in this course. So to configure the tenant level settings, we need to use the set SPO tenant PowerShell commandlet. Let's first start with the BCC external sharing invitations. This way, your IT or whoever needs to be aware gets an email every time one of your users shares a document or site with someone. First of all, we need to set the BCC external sharing invitations parameter to true, and then set the BCC external sharing invitation list to a comma-separated value of all the people that should receive an email. If you want to force people to accept and log in with the account they're invited, you need to run the require accepting account match invited account true. This way, when you invite them with a company email address, they cannot accept it with any other address. If you want to notify owners when items or when invitations are accepted or when items are reshared, you can also do that with the notify owners when invitations accepted and notify owners when items reshared. PowerShell parameters, so you can set them both to true. So if I invite Alex to my document and Alex reshares it with somebody else, as the owner of that document, I will know right away that the document has been reshared, and I might be fine with it, it might be no problem, but it's really good for me to know it before the document gets shared with people that it shouldn't be shared with. Another good example, and something I didn't actually cover before, is that you can hide the suggestions for guests inside the people picker. A lot of the times, people are curious, so when you allow them to share stuff, you give them access to a people picker, they're going to look who's inside the company, they're going to browse around, but you can actually block that, so you can block showing the suggestions for guest users while still letting them enabled for your normal users. At the site collection level, to change stuff, you can use the set SPO site PowerShell commandlet. You need to give it the identity of what site collection you want to change. And if you want to disable sharing for non-owners, it's the disable sharing for non-owners parameter. That's pretty easy. And that's actually a dedicated parameter set. So you cannot use that property on a set SPO site along with any other properties. If you want to change any other properties, you need to do a new set SPO site, even if it's the same URL, and let's say you want to change the sharing to only be permitted with a single domain. You can set the sharing domain restriction mode to allow list, and then put a space-separated list of domains in the sharing allowed domain list. This will set the Varonis.com and Microsoft.com as the only external domains people in the site collection could share with. So you know that they will not by accident share with a competitor or with anybody else outside those companies. Now that we've seen quite a lot of theory, let's go to the demo environment and configure SharePoint Online for secure external collaboration with PowerShell. We are now in the lab environment, so let's learn how to configure SharePoint Online for secure external collaboration. First of all, I have created a SharePoint Online site collection here called Extranet, and let's go and add a new user. So let me go to Site Settings, People and Groups. I will add them in the Extranet Members default category. Click on New, and let me add Vlad Catrunescu at gmail.com. Great, I have a warning that, hey, Vlad Catrunescu at gmail.com is outside your organization. That's okay, that's what I want. So I will click on Share. What will happen now is that I'm actually logged in my Gmail over here. See if it arrives in the actual inbox, or the Google and Microsoft love still isn't there yet, so it's probably somewhere in the junk. So let me go under spam here. There we go. Of course it's here. Let me try to move it to inbox so we can click on the links. There we go. John Smith wants to share extranet, and I have a message that says go to extranet. But because I'm a bad user, and again, imagine that Gmail would be my corporate identity, what I will do is I will simply copy the link address and go in this other browser where I am logged in with my Hotmail account, and even if I'm invited with gmail.com, I will log in with my Hotmail account. Because it's something that I'm allowed to do by default with Office 365. I don't have to log in the tenant I'm invited to with the account that I am invited with. And that, in my opinion, is a security flaw because, as we explained in the slides, imagine I was invited Vlad at company.com, but Vlad at company.com decides to log in with Vlad at hotmail.com. Even if after Vlad at company.com is not working there anymore, he would still have access to the site because the actual login is done on the Hotmail account. That's the credentials used to have access. So in my opinion, it's really important that this is something you block at the tenant level. Furthermore, here remember, I'm an external user. You see, I don't see the waffle. I can go and share it again. I can go and invite, like say, cmvlad at hotmail.com, vlad at vlad.com, which probably doesn't exist. And as you see, let me actually take this one off. Let me do this one. I just got invited as an external user, and I was able to invite other people to the site without even having an admin approval or anything. So let's take a look at the PowerShell command links we have learned in the slides that will help us secure our SharePoint Online sites. First of all, let me open up the PowerShell ISE over here. Let me get my credential. So I will enter the password here, and let's connect to SharePoint Online. So what I will do now is I will say, first of all, whenever somebody invites an external person to any site collection, send an email in BCC to Vlad at, let me correct this, varonisvideos.onmicrosoft.com. Also require that the accepting account matches the invited account. So this way, if I invite Vlad at company.com, only the user that has access to Vlad at company.com, and they would need to log in with the Microsoft account matching Vlad at company.com. Also, notify the owner when the invitation is accepted, and notify the owner when the item is reshared. And lastly, show people picker suggestion for guest users to false, so people cannot go and walk around and try to find who has access to our stuff and who is already in our tenant. So what I can do now is I can go back as John Smith. If I refresh this now, Vlad Catrunescu should be here, but I will remove the user from the group. So if I refresh this here, user should not be there anymore. And now, where was my Vlad Catrunescu here that has access to the extranet? I shouldn't have access anymore. Perfect. So now what I will try again as John Smith, I will try to re-add Vlad Catrunescu at gmail.com. So let me add this. It tells me, hey, Vlad Catrunescu is outside your organization. Okay, now I have invited Vlad. Let me go to Gmail. you'll see that I have Vlad Katrinescu wants to share extranet. When I click on it, it errors out because this browser is logged in with vladkatrinescu@hotmail.com. And again, I probably picked another email, but you can see the error where this item was shared with cmvlad@hotmail.com. And this organization's policy requires you to accept the invitation using the account that it was shared with. So because on this browser I'm logged in with Vlad Katrinescu, and that email that I just opened was logged in with cmvlad, it didn't allow me to do it. Now let me go and let's take a look at some site collection level settings. The first thing I will do is I will disable sharing for non-owners. So that's the first thing. And let me also modify the domains to only allow people from Varonis.com and Microsoft.com. So now if I go refresh the page over here and try to share it with somebody again from, let's say, Vlad@test.com, it doesn't allow me to do it. But if I do Vlad@Varonis.com, it should allow me to share. So as you can see, the domain allow list works as well. That is it for this demo. Thank you very much for listening to it, and I hope that you found it informative. In this module, we will talk on how to block guests from recording Skype for Business meetings or even downloading content. First of all, what is Skype for Business and why is this important? Skype for Business is used by organizations worldwide for both internal and external communications. Skype for Business allows you to have both one-on-one chats as well as audio, video, and even screen sharing meetings with up to 250 people from both inside and outside the company. Those meetings can often cover sensitive information. So it's important that you protect it and you make sure that nobody will take a part of the recording and put it out of context, or people download files that they shouldn't be downloading. As an Office 365 admin, you can control whether external users can record meetings or even download files from the meeting with PowerShell. So let's take a look at how to do it. To configure those kind of settings, Skype for Business uses policies to control what users can or cannot do. And there are multiple types of policies in Skype for Business Online. You have client policies, conferencing policies, external access policies, and voice policies. Since we are talking about meetings in this module, we'll play with the conferencing policies. And Microsoft actually offers you over 224 different conferencing policies that are already pre-configured with a bunch of different settings, and they also allow you to create your own. And those policies can be assigned to one, multiple users, or all the company. So you can even have different policies depending on the department of the user, depending on where that user is located, and so on. So how do we create a custom conferencing policies? The PowerShell commandlet is new CS conferencing policy. You give the identity. In this case, I decided to name it no permissions for externals. And I will set the settings allow external users to record meetings false, allow external user control false. This will block external users from taking control on the screen in a meeting. So let's say somebody asks for control on one of your client computers, that would be stopped automatically. Only people from inside the company can use the Skype for Business control the screen feature. And lastly, allow external users to save content false. So I'm blocking all of those three features inside the meetings. Next up, I will apply it to one of my users. So first of all, I will get my user using the get CS online user PowerShell commandlet, give the email address of the user. Then I'll use the grant CS conferencing policy PowerShell commandlet to grant that user the policy we have just created. And that is it. It's important to understand when does it apply. The policy only applies to meetings organized by users that have this policy. In this case, it would only apply to meetings organized by the account VladAdmin. If VladAdmin is in a meeting organized by John Smith right now, that meeting wouldn't have these features. Because the features apply to only the organizer, or the features are controlled by the policy applied to the organizer of the meeting. However, you can use PowerShell to assign the policy to multiple users at once, so it's not like you have to name every user. You can use getCSOnlineUser, where department equals research, and assign them a policy for the research department. So that is pretty easy to do. Be careful when you apply conferencing policies. Like a few of the other things we've seen in this course, it can take up to a few hours for everything to take effect, so if you try it right away, it might not work. You're better off giving it a day before testing to make sure that everything had time to apply properly. Now let's go to the demo environment and learn how to block guests from recording Skype for Business meeting or downloading files by creating a custom conferencing policy with PowerShell. We are now in the lab environment, so let's learn how to block guests from recording Skype for Business meetings, downloading file, and taking control. First of all, I'm here in the PowerShell ISC, so the first thing I will do is, again, I will get my credentials, so let me put my password in there, as we've seen previously, and then let me connect to Skype for Business online. Have to say yes over here, should only take about 10-15 seconds for the connection to be done. Because it's a remote PowerShell session, it has to download the temporary module and everything. Now what I will do is I will create the conferencing policy. So I will call it no permission for external. And when we do that, let me actually show you really quick some of the other settings that we can do, because there's multiple settings that you can do for every conferencing policy. For example, do you want to enable or disable PowerPoint annotations? Do you want to allow anonymous users to dial out or not? Do you want to, we have looked at the save content, user control, user to record meeting. Do you want to have shared notes, Q&A? Do you want to completely stop conferencing recording or not? So there's multiple settings out there that you can modify to make the kind of conference policy that you need. And of course, depending on how sensitive your content is. Maybe for the sales guy, you want to have a conferencing policy that allows them to share files, share control, everything. But for the people in the research department, you wanted to have it a lot more locked down. So what you can do is you can create multiple of them inside your tenant and then assign them to the right people in the right departments depending on what they need. So now let me run a getCSOnlineUser VladAdmin at varonisvideos.onmicrosoft.com and give it the conference policy that we have just created. Should only take a few seconds, and then just to verify, I will get all of the users in this tenant and simply show me the user principal name and what conferencing policy they have. Let's try that again. Let's see. Perfect. So you see the VladAdmin is now set to no permission for external, which is a conferencing policy that we have just created, and all of the rest of the people are on BPOS all modality, which is the default one. So now that the policy is applied, I will actually pause the recording and wait for a few hours before recording the second part. This way, we're sure that the policy has applied and it works properly. Back in the lab a few hours later, so let's try our Skype for Business meeting or conferencing policies. I'm logged in as Vlad and I will go to the calendar and let me set a meeting for today. Go here, call it test S4B meeting, add a Skype meeting, and let me add a Hotmail user here, cmvlad@hotmail.com. Use this address and then click on send. So I will join it here using Vlad, and then I will join it on my computer, or because this is in a VM, so I'll join it on another computer. and we will be able to try it, see if when I share an attachment, does it actually allow the external user to download it, and if the external user can have more controls or things like that. So let me copy this link, open it, like I said, in another window where I will log in as, I'll call it Alex. Click on join, and there we go, Alex has joined the meeting. What I will do now is I will add an attachment. One of the things we have turned off is that external users cannot download attachments. So let me select this PowerPoint file here, upload finished, and now let me drag and drop Alex here. So this is where I'm signed in as Alex the guest. If I go into my content, if I go into the attachments, you see that because I'm an external user, I don't have the rights to save the file. I don't have the rights to do anything. And here Alex, who is a user, everybody can download, those are the permissions, but because of the conference policy, external users are not able to download it, so our policy has worked. This is it for this module. In this module, we have learned how to create a custom conferencing policy for Skype for Business, and we have looked at a few settings for the external users, but by learning how to do that conferencing policy, you're now able to configure and to optimize the meeting experience for all of the users inside the company to allow them to be productive while also being secure. Thank you very much for listening to this module, and I hope you found it informative.